We're now live on YouTube.
Thanks, Maria. Good evening and welcome. This is the second virtual Public Information Center for the Downtown Brantford Streetscaping project. This meeting is being streamed live and recording can be watched on the City of Brantford's YouTube page. Welcome and thank you to those who are registered to speak today and to those of you who are watching live. Thank you lastly to everyone who submitted questions and comments to the Let's Talk Brantford page or to the project team over the past couple of weeks. In addition to those registered to speak, we also have city staff available to respond to questions as subject matter experts should the need arise. My name is Gagan Batra and I am the city's project manager on this project. With me today are Vince Puglisi and Dave Hallman from MTE Consultants and Mark Zuzenjak from GSP Group. Before we begin, I just want to outline some housekeeping items for keeping the meeting running smoothly. Firstly, we ask that you mute your mics until you're invited to speak. We ask that you turn off your cameras and keep your cameras off. If you're having trouble with muting or with camera functions, we are able to control it on our end. We'll assist with it if it's necessary. And once the presentation is complete, we will open the floor for questions and comments, at which point the project team and staff would be happy to answer any questions. Now, the purpose of this information session is to present the details about the Downtown Brantford Streetscaping Environmental Assessment Project, including where we are in the process, the studies that have been completed to date, and the various options that have been evaluated. This presentation will also provide information about the technically preferred alternative that's been selected for the study area and the next steps in the process. Following the presentation, as I said, we're going to open up the floor for questions and comments from the public, and at that time, we'll be happy to address any comments that we have received to date. We will now begin sharing our screen to go through the presentation. Vince, can you please start sharing? Thanks. So firstly, I just want to say thank you again to everybody for their interest in this project and for participating in the Virtual Public Information Center. The project is one component of the larger plan for downtown, and as we go through the presentation, you will see how the streetscaping contributes to the overall plan and vision for the downtown area. Though we are at PIC2, there will be many opportunities for the public to provide comment and further engage in this process. All of the public information and input that we've received to date and that we will continue to receive is going to be used to determine the direction of this project and will be looked at seriously as we move forward in the project. So next slide. This slide just presents the agenda for the evening. We'll begin by discussing the previous studies and how they relate to the project, showing how we've gotten here, where we are, and where we're going to go. We will review the study area, the process, and the status, provide information about the purpose of the Public Information Center that we're at currently, review the feedback that we've received to date, including findings from the surveys and the previous Public Information Center we held back in the winter. We will then go into the evaluation criteria that has been used to evaluate the alternatives that are being presented to you. We will then present 5 different alternatives and score each one based on the evaluation criteria that's presented. We will then explain the technically preferred alternative and how we got to that option. Lastly, we will go through the next steps in the environmental assessment process and what you can expect to see over the coming months. As I said before, the Downtown Brantford Streetscaping Environmental Assessment is just one part of the city's plan for the whole downtown area. While this study specifically is focusing on the infrastructure and engineering elements, there are various other studies that have come before that we have and will continue to consult with and rely on to ensure that our project is consistent with the plans for the entire downtown area. The first study listed here is the 2008 Master Plan for Downtown Brantford. This study outlines the plans for creating a vibrant and attractive downtown, revitalizing the core, making it a pedestrian-friendly space, increasing density targets, and bringing people into the area. The master plan was developed through significant stakeholder engagement and acts as a guide for downtown development and growth. The second study listed here is the Waterfront Master Plan that was published in 2010. This plan provides guidance for how space in close proximity to waterfront can be utilized in the city to create bright and vibrant neighborhoods. While this study does not directly extend to the waterfront, it's in close proximity, and it will incorporate the vision of the waterfront master plan to create a harmonized project for the entire area. The 2010 study on the conversion of Colburn Street and Dalhousie Street to two-way traffic operations was a previous study that was conducted and has now lapsed. The study focused on recommendations for converting the two main streets to two-way traffic, and the information has been incorporated and considered in this study, recognizing that the area has changed significantly over the past 11 years. The Downtown Streetscape Design Plan developed in 2011 also provides guidance for various streetscaping elements that might be included in the study and the design. In 2021, the city developed the Urban Design Manual, the Transportation Master Plan, the Master Servicing Plan, and the Official Plan, all which provide information and guidance around the development that's expected to occur within the city and the overall vision for the city in terms of accommodating greater density in the downtown area and providing more active transportation options. And all of these studies were also incorporated, and you'll see how later on in the presentation. Not listed here, but also significant, is the plan for Colburn Point, the property on the south side of Colburn Street adjacent to the Laurier YMCA facility. This area could provide a potential gateway into the downtown area, and this environmental assessment is keeping the plans for Colburn Point in mind as well as we move forward. Lastly, the Downtown Brantford Streetscaping EA, the environmental assessment we are working on and presenting about today, is the first part in the process of addressing all of our underground and above ground infrastructure and engineering elements. And we're excited to talk about how we're going to move along in this process and how our plans fit into the plan for the greater downtown vision. Now I will hand it over to Vince to continue on to the next part of the presentation.
Thanks, Gagan. So the figure here shows the study area, which includes Colburn Street and Dalhousie Street from Brant Ave and ICOM Drive to the east limit where Colburn Street and Dalhousie meet. It also includes the north-south streets between Colburn Street and Dalhousie Street, Brant Ave, King Street, Queen Street, Market Street, Charlotte Street, and Clarence Street. The project includes the replacement of underground infrastructure as well as the above ground streetscaping improvements, which include road configuration, street furniture, plantings, etc. One of the main drivers of this project is the need to replace the aging underground infrastructure, including water mains, sanitary sewer, storm sewer, and other utilities. Some of the constraints that we noticed when the project team went out to site, we conducted a site walk of the study area to identify some of the constraints within the corridor. There are a few significant constraints that were quickly identified, including areas which would not meet the current accessibility standards. Curbside management was identified as a key constraint for the downtown, especially given that there is garbage collection 6 days a week, meaning there is garbage at the curbside nearly every day. The speed of drivers through the downtown is also apparent when you're downtown. The speeds can be attributed to the width of the lanes. The lanes are generally 4 meters wide, which gives drivers a sense of comfort traveling at higher speeds. The lack of delineation of on-street parking also contributes to the open feeling and can contribute to the speed. The high speeds make it challenging for pedestrians to cross the street safely. We noticed that there was no distinct loading area or delineation for key features and that there's little greenery in many areas downtown. As was mentioned, the main driver for this streetscaping project is the need for replacement of much of the underground infrastructure in the downtown. The infrastructure improvements will result in disturbing a majority of the right-of-way, which is the land the city owns between property lines from one side of the road to the other. This is a great opportunity for the city to improve the streetscape, as the surface features will need to be restored regardless. Streetscaping projects like this one often coincide with underground infrastructure improvements because the entire surface is being replaced anyways. After looking at the constraints and opportunities, we developed a vision and problem opportunity statement. These act as reminders of what the objectives of the project are, as it can be easy to start thinking about other things that are in need of improvements as we go along. The vision for this project is adapted from various downtown and city documents. The official plan for the city and the downtown master plan were incorporated when creating the vision for this project. To create a downtown Brantford that is attractive, vibrant, and safe for all users while providing the necessary infrastructure needed to handle growth in the city's core. The main objectives of this project and all overarching work being done in downtown are to make it a destination place, enhance infrastructure for all transportation modes, including pedestrians, cyclists, transit users, and to improve the accessibility and safety in the downtown. Specifically, this project to streetscape the downtown is addressing the problem opportunity statement to revitalize Brantford's core by improving infrastructure, accessibility, safety, and rebuilding an aesthetically beautiful and adaptable downtown. This project is following a municipal Class C environmental assessment process. The study was started in July of 2020. In August of 2020, we held a number of in-person stakeholder workshop sessions to gather feedback on the proposed streetscaping. We took the results of the workshops as well as the various stakeholder meetings to the public at PIC number 1 held in December of 2020. We are at PIC number 2, where we're presenting the technically preferred alternative. A third and final PIC is planned for sometime this summer, with the environmental study report expected to be submitted before the end of the year. There are two main objectives for tonight's PIC. The first is to present the design alternatives that we generated by the project team based on stakeholder feedback, as well as run through the evaluation process. The second is to present the technically preferred alternative and the rationale supporting the selection of that alternative. To really get into the alternatives that we're presenting, this slide shows some of the results from the workshop sessions and public surveys. But the main takeaways and themes from our engagement are to create a pedestrian-friendly environment, include cycle lanes, reduce the speed of traffic through downtown, beautify the area with more greenery and other features, ensure downtown is more accessible and age-friendly, maintain a high level of on-street parking, increase overall safety, and attract visitors. Through stakeholder engagement, it was clear that having a dedicated cycling facility was important for the downtown. If cycle lanes are going to be successful long-term, successful in that they will dramatically increase the number of cyclists downtown, then there needs to be connectivity with other cycling facilities. Creating cycle lanes in isolation will not be successful long-term. This figure shows the existing and proposed bikeways as identified by the city's transportation master plan, which also shows plans for Colborne Street and Dalhousie Street being part of the cycling network. As seen from this, there is potential to connect the proposed cycling facilities on Colborne and Dalhousie Street with the existing trails along the Grand River. While not pictured here, there's also potential to create a greater cycling network by connecting the downtown with the pedestrian cycling bridges over the Grand River. As part of the environmental assessment, a number of supporting studies have been completed, and the results of the studies factor into the evaluation of the alternatives. A natural environment study was completed, which indicated that there were no significant impacts expected to the natural environment. In fact, by including additional street trees, we'll actually be improving the overall habitat for wildlife downtown. Archaeological and cultural heritage studies were also completed. They both indicated that there were features within the study area that we should be aware of during the design process. However, the expectation is that any reconstruction will be limited to the city's right-of-way, which is considered a previously disturbed area and has low archaeological and heritage potential. Also included was a traffic study, which looked at how traffic moves through the downtown under current conditions. We use the results from the traffic modeling to determine the level of service at each intersection, and then give that level of service a letter grade. The levels of service indicated will represent the average of all the turning movements at the intersection, meaning that even if there's a significant delay in one direction at the intersection, but the other directions move well, then the level of service will be shown could still be good. A level of service A would be an intersection that moves with little to no delay, and F would be an intersection with significant queuing and delay. When the level of service is displayed at each intersection, we get a picture of how traffic moves along Colborne and Dalhousie. We focused our attention on the intersections from Brant Avenue to Clarence Street for this evaluation. When you're looking at this figure in the next couple, please note that a level of service D is generally considered acceptable for an intersection in a downtown core. The traffic study included an evaluation of the corridor under a one-way and two-way scenario. and using 2041 traffic projections as per the city's transportation master plan. Under the one-way scenario, we see significant impacts to traffic along Clarence Street in the PM peak, but the rest of the corridor maintains a sufficient level of service. The issues we see along Clarence come from the fact that currently there are no turning lanes at Colborne or Dalhousie, and this causes backups when someone attempts to turn left. Through this EA, we'll be looking at whether there is an opportunity to add turning lanes along Clarence. The main constraint to doing that is currently the active train tracks that run along the east side of Clarence. Under the two-way scenario, we see the same problems along Clarence in the PM peak, but now we see delays in the AM peak as well. We also start to see some further delays at the Brant Ave intersection with Colborne. This table compares the change in level of service at each intersection. Overall, what we find is that in the 2041 scenario, that one-way traffic moves traffic more efficiently through the corridor. In both scenarios, there are significant delays along Clarence, so we will need to explore options for introducing turning lanes. The traffic study has some limitations, and so there are certain factors that impact traffic that don't show up in these results. Factors like garbage collection, loading, unloading, other curbside management, and maintenance, etc. We'll capture the impact of these factors in the evaluation of each alternative. The parking study looked at the capacity of on-street and off-street parking in the downtown. There are 1,682 parking spots downtown, including 1,141 off-street and 541 on-street spots. For the purpose of analyzing parking, we've assumed on Colborne and Dalhousie, parking will be on one side of the road only. The decision to remove parking from one side of the street in our alternatives was to accommodate feedback received throughout the project that the downtown should create more opportunities for other modes of traffic, including cycling lanes. In the vision for this project, as well as the city's transportation master plan, the city's commitment to active transportation is apparent. And for this reason, the options being presented will prioritize creating a more pedestrian-friendly and cycling-friendly environment. With parking on one side of the road, we see that it will reduce the number of on-street spots by 84, 40 on Colborne and 44 on Dalhousie. Prior to COVID, the parkade operated at approximately 60% capacity, and the overall reduction in parking expected downtown would be 5%. As the design progresses, we'll look at a variety of ways to reduce the amount of on-street parking that is lost. One approach is to introduce flexible parking spots that can be changed throughout the year. The main criteria we used to evaluate the design alternatives were vision, social environment, safety, traffic operations, and cost. To help give some clarity, this table lists some of the elements that represent what would meet that criteria. They are broken down into things that benefit the individual user and things that would benefit the community as a whole. So looking at vision, elements that lead to improving walkability, increasing pedestrian capacity, and making downtown a people place would score higher under the vision criteria. Under the social environment category, we were looking at things like addressing curbside management, improving accessibility, improving cycling facilities, accommodating for public transit, and considerations for parking. If an element had any impact on cultural heritage structures or natural environment, it would score lower. The safety categories includes improving safety for pedestrians, cyclists, as well as drivers. Traffic operations includes the results of the traffic study we just discussed, but also factors in things like garbage collection, which occurs 6 days a week in downtown, and how that will impact the flow of traffic. Much of the overall cost for this project will come from the replacement of the underground infrastructure below the road and replacing the road itself. And a lot of that cost will be the same under all the alternatives. So the cost comparison you'll see is primarily focused on the cost of streetscaping features and maintenance. So I'm going to pass it over to Mark Zuzenjak from GSP to discuss the evaluation and the alternatives.
Thanks, Vince. So this table shows how the alternatives were evaluated. The evaluation of each of the alternatives is represented by circles as shown on the screen. The fuller a circle is, the better that alternative met the criteria for each category, ranging from good, represented by a full circle, fair, which was a half-filled circle, to poor, which would be empty. The alternatives, which we will discuss in detail, the options are do nothing, two-way traffic with a bidirectional bike facility, two-way traffic with a separated bike facility, one-way traffic with a bidirectional bike facility, and one-way traffic with a single separated bike facility. Please note that the alternatives noted above were generated based upon the feedback and comments received through consultation with stakeholders and the public up to this stage of the project. In creating these alternatives, it was made clear that due to the restrictions from the narrow right-of-way in the downtown core, which is 20 meters, that not all elements of streetscaping could be included at the same time. For this reason, cycling lanes, pedestrian space, parking on at least one side of the street, and vehicular lanes were prioritized. Based upon our evaluation, we've determined that the technically preferred alternative is a one-way alternative that includes a single bike lane, as demonstrated by alternative number 5. The following slides will provide a brief overview of each of the alternatives that were assessed and how each fared in relation to the evaluation criteria as noted. So alternative 1 is shown on screen is the do nothing option. As part of the municipal class EA process, it is necessary to evaluate the do nothing alternative, in this case, alternative number 1. The do nothing suggests that we drop the project completely. If we were to take this approach, the streetscape would remain as is. Obviously, without making any change, the opportunity to implement enhancements which complement the city's vision for the public realm of downtown would be missed. In order to meet the vision of a more attractive, more vibrant, and safe destination that is welcoming and accessible for residents and visitors, which can accommodate future growth and development of the downtown, change in the form of repair or enhancement is required. This applies to both the aging infrastructure below grade as well as the surface treatments and elements that you see at grade. Without any improvements to the aesthetics, accessibility, and without the provision of cycle lanes, this alternative scores low in terms of social environment. From a traffic perspective, the current configuration of lanes and curbs does move traffic well through the downtown. However, despite accommodating current traffic, the current condition does not address the speed of traffic downtown, which is a major contributor to the overall safety of drivers and pedestrians. As a result, this option does not provide the most opportune condition for creating a safer public realm for pedestrians. In terms of cost, because this option proposes to do nothing, it is the cheapest alternative in terms of capital cost. Long-term costs, though, relating to the operation, maintenance, and repair of the existing surfaces do present implied costs for this alternative. Utilities below ground would still need to be maintained, replaced, and potentially upsized to meet growth projections, and this also has a cost associated with it. So alternative 2 is a two-way option with separated bike facility. This alternative includes conversion to two-way traffic on both Colburn and Dalhousie and has a dedicated bi-directional bike cycle facility along with lay-by parking on one side of the road. Through our evaluation, we considered the opportunities this alternative presents towards achieving the overall vision as it addresses the inclusion of active transportation, improves pedestrian facilities, and narrows the roadway, which should lead to traffic calming and slower speeds. A limitation to this alternative is that with the introduction of cycling facility and lay-by parking, the space available for patios and street furniture is the same as the existing condition. While the opportunity with this option would allow for resurfacing of the pedestrian realm and increase accessibility for pedestrians, the limited space available for additional pedestrian amenities is constrained. Although there are current subgrade technologies that allow for street tree plantings within a narrow space, the addition of any trees to the streetscape would further constrain the widths available within the sidewalk area for pedestrians. Another challenge to consider with this two-way traffic alternative is a greater impact on traffic from the perspective of curbside management. With only one lane in each direction, a stop garbage truck or delivery vehicle would bring traffic to a stop. As a result of this, in combination with the traffic study analysis, this alternative has received a lower measure of score towards traffic operations criteria. The narrower road widths, lay-by parking that is located behind the curb, and provision of a separated cycling facility result in a higher safety evaluation. With respect to pedestrian crossing, two-way would require increased attention when considering vehicular movement in both directions. From a cost perspective, the cost of maintenance, specifically plowing and snow removal for the cycle lanes, is higher than the other alternatives. Alternative 3, two-way traffic with separated cycle lanes. So similar to alternative number 2, this also proposes two-way traffic with lay-by parking provided on one side of the road. This alternative differs by locating individual cycle lanes on opposite sides of the road in the same direction as traffic. As outlined through the evaluation of the previous alternative, the provision of two-way traffic is not as efficient as one-way traffic, with the same conflicts expected through curbside management. Although the cycle lanes are distributed on either side of the road, there is also no net increase in the space that would be available for pedestrian walkways, seating areas, furnishings, and street trees. Maintenance costs for this scenario would be similar to the previous alternative. Alternative 4, one-way traffic with bi-directional cycling. Alternative 4 proposes a one-way alternative that includes a bi-directional cycle facility, which is protected behind the curb, and parking on one side of the road only through a lay-by, which is also behind curb. As per the previous alternatives presented so far, the cycle facility, along with the reduction of traffic lane widths and surface improvements to the pedestrian walkways, results in a favorable rating towards aligning with the project's overall vision for downtown. Also similar to the two-way options, the provision of two cycle lanes and parking on one side mean that functional space remaining for pedestrians would again remain relatively the same as the current condition. Given the space constraints of the right-of-way, there is a trade-off with every feature we include, as each requires their own minimum footprint within the right-of-way. Where we see the biggest difference between the one-way and two-way options is in the operation of traffic and the impact of curbside management. In a one-way scenario where there is garbage collection or loading, cars can change lanes to pass the parked vehicles without any delay, and there is still little need for dedicated loading zones or laybys for curbside management. In all of the alternatives, we expect a high level of safety, as the main factors that will contribute to improved safety will be narrower lanes that slow traffic, reduced pedestrian crossing distances, and cycle lanes that are separated from the travel lanes. A common thought is that two-way traffic operations have the effect of slowing traffic. However, in a one-way scenario, the slowing of traffic can be achieved by narrowing the lanes to naturally reduce the speeds at which people drive. The addition of more pedestrian crossings and other elements. As providing safety is a main focus of this alternative, these safety measures are applied in the evaluation of each cross-section alternative which proposed change to the right-of-way. Alternative 5, one-way single bike lane. Alternative number 5 is a two-lane, one-way roadway that includes parking on one side and a unidirectional separated cycle lane. Per our review of the evaluation criteria, this alternative was determined to be the most favorable towards aligning with the vision of the downtown, as it is the only alternative that allows for widening the pedestrian and patio space, or potential patio space, from what exists currently. Due to the reduction of space required for 2 lanes of cycling on each street, there is extra width gained in the cross-section. As a result, there is increased opportunity available for pedestrian seating or patio areas, street plantings, and other pedestrian amenities that create a more walkable and accommodating public realm and increase social opportunity. Similar to the previous one-way alternative, there is less impact to traffic for curbside management, or due to curbside management, and overall one-way traffic moves vehicles more efficiently. In this preferred alternative, cyclists would ride in the same direction as vehicles, and the side streets can be used as a connection between Colborne and Dalhousie, similarly to how they are used for vehicles. From a cost perspective, this alternative would have the least amount of maintenance required for the upkeep of the cycle lane. Based upon the opportunity to widen the pedestrian realm, and the benefits which come with this increased space, alternative number 5, as shown on the screen, is determined as the preferred alternative for allocation of programming within the right-of-way. So preliminary options that were screened out. There were some additional alternatives for elements of the right-of-way that were explored during consultation for this project. On-street cycle lanes as either shared or dedicated lanes that were not separated by a curb were considered. However, the drawbacks included further widening of the asphalt lanes that may encourage faster speeds, therefore reducing opportunity for traffic calming and a reduction in the safety for cyclists. This option created too many conflict points between vehicles and cyclists maneuvering in and out of parking spaces or laybys, so it was not carried forward. One-way traffic with a single lane to maximize the space available for sidewalks and treatment behind curb was also explored. However, a single traffic lane would significantly hinder traffic flow during curbside pickup and would likely reduce response times for emergency service vehicles moving through the downtown. We also considered applying varying right-of-way alternatives for Colborne and Dalhousie, but there was concern over the potential for creation of inequality of cycling, parking, or pedestrian opportunities for businesses and residents. As a result, it was determined that applying a consistent cross-section for both streets was the most equitable approach. So upon review of the alternatives proposed and the evaluation criteria used to determine a preferred approach, you may be left wondering why these criteria are so important. So to demonstrate the impacts that some of the enhancements proposed can have on the revitalization of streetscapes and their contribution towards creating a more welcoming and walkable destination for pedestrians, we felt it was important to once again show how some of these principles were applied and implemented in other municipalities and the effects they had on the pedestrian realm. So the first example shown is from King Street in downtown Kitchener. The images at the top of the slide show the pre-construction condition of the right-of-way, as the design of King Street was more conducive to vehicular movement rather than the accommodation of pedestrians and cyclists. Narrower sidewalks with limited space for streetscape amenities such as trees or seating areas provided for a bleak pedestrian experience. The image on the top right shows a typical raised planter in the pre-construction condition with limited soil volumes and which resulted in trees of poor deteriorating condition. In this case, the tree was removed from the planter that can be seen. Extending from Frederick to Francis Street, or 5 street blocks, the images at the bottom of the slide show the post-construction condition, which shifted the emphasis of the operation of the road to instead prioritize pedestrians and cyclists by narrowing traffic lanes and increasing the width of the pedestrian realm behind the curb. This allowed for the provision of sidewalks with dedicated travel paths and furnishing zones which provide consistent seating elements, increased opportunity for street trees, and space for flexible parking or seasonal patio space for the benefit of existing businesses and restaurants along the King Street right-of-way. Bollards located along the back of the curb are movable and can be pulled away from the curb to release spaces for parking or pushed back to the curb for pedestrian uses. Traffic lanes are shared, in this case between cyclists, transit and vehicles, with the overall width of the roadway reduced to assist with slowing traffic and increasing pedestrian safety. The second example is from downtown Guelph, showing Wilson and Carden Street. So this slide shows an example of Wilson and Carden Street through the various images. The image to the top of the slide shows the pre-construction condition of Wilson Street looking south towards Carden and Guelph City Hall. In this example, vehicles are once again given the priority with wide traffic lanes and asphalt extending directly into parking on both sides of the street, leaving little room for pedestrians between the back of curb and the building frontage, or for streetscape elements such as street tree plantings or decorative lighting. The image to the bottom left is taken from above Carden Street, looking back towards Wilson Street, and shows the post-construction condition or the enhanced condition, showing the initiative to reduce the width of the traffic lanes with reorienting the on-street parking and locating it behind curb. The use of precast pavers to provide additional contrast and differentiation of the parking from the roadway also assists with traffic calming by slowing traffic and clearly delineating the extensive parking and sidewalks from one another. Replacement of the existing utility poles and Cobra head lighting also adds to the placemaking and character of the street. The image to the bottom right shows a view looking west along Carden Street towards Wilson Street and shows the widened sidewalks with clear delineation of a site furnishing zone, including trees and bollards to separate the sidewalk from parking spaces, the pedestrian walkway, and then dedicated space for seating or displays along storefronts which line the street. Similar to King Street in Kitchener, Carden Street is a flexible street that can be closed for special events and is primarily located across from City Hall and the exterior splash pad or seasonal rink, which adds to the programming for the street and creates a destination for residents and visitors throughout the year. The final example that we'll show is from downtown Stratford, showing Stratford Market Square and Marketplace. and also including the side streets of Wellington Street, which is located to the west, and Downey Street to the east. So the above image is taken looking along Marketplace from Downey Street towards the existing square and Wellington Street. The pre-construction condition demonstrates a space that is once again primarily designed for the accommodation of vehicles, as it provided parking on both sides of this one-way street, with the existing transit hub located in the northern portion of the square. This condition provided a very open and uninviting feel for pedestrians, with narrow sidewalks and a high amount of vehicular traffic and congestion in the square and on the adjacent streets. The use of the space and surrounding streets for pedestrian use was limited, with limited amenities to frame the space. Commercial space along Marketplace was subject to vacancy and turnover rates, with limited space for storefront displays or patio seating. The aerial image to the bottom left shows the post-construction condition, where the different paving materials were used to distinguish Market Square and the pedestrian realm for the surrounding streets, with curbs along Wellington and Downey pushed out to narrow the road width and slow traffic. This also provided laybys for buses as traffic calming elements to slow the speed of vehicles as they move by. The extension of the pedestrian paving into Marketplace also acts as a traffic calming element, and the laneway, or as the laneway is narrowed, and sidewalks in front of the storefronts are widened. New lighting and bollards are utilized to delineate the extent of parking areas. Pedestrian seating, at-grade planting, and other site furnishings assist in creating a more comfortable experience for pedestrians and creates a distinguished landmark and destination in the heart of Stratford's downtown for residents and visitors. So in terms of the study and the next steps, so as we've moved towards the presentation and preparation of these alternatives, the next step for the study area is actually fitting them onto the site. So we've developed these conceptually with the ideas that we've collected through our own interpretation of the site and the input from stakeholders in the public up to this point. And moving forward then into detailed design, our role now is to take the comments that are received tonight and through correspondence from the public through this PIC, and then we will be applying the designs and how they fit specifically into the right-of-way along the street, with the understanding of specific conditions that will influence how the design is laid out. We will be looking at opportunities for implementing safe pedestrian crossings. We will be providing specific locations and more detail about specific streetscape elements. So the things that you see and you get to touch and experience, including surface types, site furnishings such as benches, planting opportunities, which improve sustainability and stormwater retention. And then we'll also be looking at how the infrastructure that's required, how that might influence the at-grade improvements for the right-of-ways of the study area.
Thanks, Mark. The next slide shown here really just goes through the next steps in the environmental assessment process. So as you can see from the first dot there, following this live presentation, we will have a question and comment period open for 2 weeks in which the public can submit their questions, comments, any feedback they have regarding the material that we've presented today or anything else related to this project. They can submit it directly to the project team through Let's Talk Brantford and through various other avenues. And all that feedback and questions, comments are going to be compiled and posted in a question and answer document on June the 3rd, where the project team will go through, compile all of them and provide answers. And that'll go live on our website on June the 3rd. Following that, we are going to have another public information center, our final one, in the summer of 2021, where, as Mark said, we will provide more detailed information about the recommendations and specific streetscaping elements that are being proposed. Following the last PIC, what we're going to do is present the findings and the recommendations to council, and then we can finalize and file this project report for public review. And we're expecting that to happen sometime in November, December of this year. Pending council approval, we will be moving into the detailed design stage for the cross sections. And that'll likely occur between 2022 and 2023, following which we can start on the construction, which will be starting in 2023, pending, again, council approval. So Thank you. That's all we had for the presentation. Shown on the slide is information about how you can reach the project team members, myself or Vince. And our project webpage is also shown at the bottom there. It's brantford.ca/new downtown or letstalkbrantford.ca/downtown. We'll now dedicate the remaining time of tonight's session to answering the questions and comments that we have. So I'll hand it over to my colleague Maria to facilitate the Q&A portion of the evening.
Great, thanks, Gavin. My name is Maria Visaki. I'm the city's Director of Communications and Community Engagement. And I too want to thank all of you who have joined us to watch and or listen to tonight's Public Information Center regarding this important city initiative. As Gagan mentioned, we're going to use the rest of the time in tonight's session for questions and answers from both registered participants as well as addressing comments and questions that were received by the project team through the city's Let's Talk Brantford engagement portal. So I'm going to go to the registrants first, who have been patiently waiting in the waiting room. And I'm going to start with Ms. Elizabeth Coster. So if you want to come forward and ask your question, Elizabeth. So I'll just ask that you unmute yourself, Elizabeth.
Okay, I think I just.
There you go.
Hi.
Hi.
I have quite a few comments. I'm not quite sure where to start. I just want to say who I am. My daughter and I are owners of Old World Marketplace on 203 Colburn Street. And we have another store that's opening very shortly, this, that, and the other thing. And so I had written a letter a while back, and I believe I've sent it twice now to different people. I have walked around before the COVID took and closed us down again, and got, well, now 50 signatures of how people do feel. Now, I've been told that, you know, people don't care, so they don't come to meetings, they don't do anything because they don't care, but they really do care. And I will try to find out why they don't come to these meetings, and more as I go along, as the weather gets better and we have permission to go back on the street, because I walked the streets for quite a few days getting these signatures, and they do care. So one of my issues definitely is the two-way traffic. My questions are, how does that benefit the people like us that have stores to get missed by the traffic going both ways? Now, to turn around and come back here, even if they know where we are, you really have to go up to King Street, Queen Street, and if you miss and don't get a parking spot, they just go and leave. So you don't get out of town people as well, because they're not going to know. So for merchants on Colburn Street and Delucy Street, we would get a lot more exposure by two-way traffic. So that's one of my issues. The other was the security. I've had 2 break-ins already, where the 806 one of them was, and crowbar use, and they got in and took things from our store. Then they got in our other part and they took a modem, for what reason I don't know, and many other things. So we're scared. We've got cameras all over, and that's another issue. The other was the having 24/7 security control, police walking, something just to keep us safer. We have many comments where people do not want to come downtown because they're afraid. They're afraid to come and shop here. So that's another issue. Parking, really a big issue. So when I think of bike lanes, I think, how do we get more parking? Bike lanes will take away more of our parking, so we have less shoppers. The other thing is, I now live downtown 24/7. I work here, I live here. And so I see what's going on Colburn Street 24/7. I've had people on my patio top, I've had on my rooftop, I've had people sleeping, using my storefronts for toilets. So there's a lot of issues here that I'm really, really concerned about. So I'm going to, I took some notes about bike routes. My question would be, how is that going to help our businesses? Because the only bikes that I really see are the stolen ones by a lot of the homeless. And we've had bikes tied up here that are stolen. One was a $6,000 one for some of our clients. And so I'm really concerned about bike lanes. Like how will that help our businesses on Colburn and Dalhousie Street and the other streets as well? But as you can see, I'm very much concerned about Dalhousie and Colburn. So these are some of my questions, and I'll have many more, so I won't take the time tonight. But those are some of the ones I'd like to hear some of the comments on. I worked here in the very store I own now was Loblaws when I was 15, 16. I know what it was like to live here then. And nothing changed with Colburn and Dalhousie structurally. It's still the same, up, down, still the same thing when I had two-way traffic. Friendly policemen checking your doors. Like, I know systems have changed, but I would like to see some of this old life back to bring Brantford to let people come and shop in our stores that we have downtown. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. There's a little bit to unpack there. So we're gonna try.
I was trying to speak quickly to get it in.
No, that's okay. We only have a couple of people that are registered to speak, and then we're going to go to a number of questions. Some of them may be consistent with some of the concerns that you've raised. So it's all good. We would have covered a number of the points that you have already brought to our attention. But just for the panelists, I'm going to try to break it down so that we can answer one at a time. So the first one was about the two-way traffic on downtown, and how that would benefit
so fast. They speed so quickly down here that it's a big issue. I just want to add.
Okay, so we'll start with that.
Okay.
Who's going to tackle that one?
So I don't know, Mark or Vince, if you want to provide a response. I can speak a little bit more high level about the two-way, one-way conversation, but maybe you guys.
I can start with addressing the speeds through downtown. So one of the things that we did mention in the presentation is that the speeding that you see downtown, it's very real, first of all. And that comes from the fact that the lanes are currently 4 meters wide. And that's really wide for lanes in a city. And what that does is it gives drivers a feeling of being able to go faster than they should. It feels like you can go 70, 80 kilometers an hour. So the first thing that all of the options that we presented will narrow the lanes. And what the narrower lanes do is it really reduces the feeling of being able to speed. So now it feels like you should be going 40 or 50 as opposed to going 70 or 80. And that's going to slow traffic down. So you're not going to have people zooming through downtown. And that will give them more time to drive slower and see the shops and see what's downtown and experience downtown. So we do want to make downtown more of an experience. And the main way that we can do that is by slowing traffic down through the downtown while still being able to move traffic through the downtown. And that's what our traffic study represented was that the one-way traffic does provide a better opportunity to move traffic through downtown without getting too much congestion, while still slowing the traffic down with the narrower lanes that we're going to be implementing. So,
Elizabeth, maybe I can just speak to your point about the one-way versus two-way and how it impacts businesses. There are a lot of different studies. There's no real conclusive information right now about what benefits business more in terms of one-way or two-way, but there are benefits in both. So if you have two-way traffic on Colburn, since you'll have traffic moving in both directions, it might cause people to only take Colburn for both of their directions, and then they completely miss all of the businesses on Dalhousie. So there's that issue with visibility as well for businesses. And That's another reason why we presented our options as applying the same treatment to both of the streets, because we're trying to ensure there is that equality for the businesses, for the residences, for everybody who's downtown in that area. So maybe that helps to answer that question a little bit. I don't know, Mark, did you have anything to add about the two-way traffic?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the two-way, one-way or two-way, I think we are really relying on the input from the traffic study and the findings of those. One thing to consider as well is that, as Vince alluded to and as Elizabeth alluded to, is the speed of the downtown. So if you think about it in its current condition with the wider lanes, plus the other added element is the grade change that you have as it slopes down. So that tends to make people feel as though they can go faster, unfortunately. But by reducing the lanes, as Vince indicated, and by animating the street a little bit more to look at, more animation of the storefronts along there, that should help to bring the traffic speeds down that are experienced.
Yep.
Thanks, guys. The second part of the questions that Elizabeth posed were very much around the theme of security and security in the downtown. And I just want to preface before I go to the project team that some of the things that you raised, Elizabeth, are not within the city's purview as much to manage in terms of crime and addressing crime as it's happening. That is something that we obviously work very closely with police on. And we do have a security management program that is currently in place that rolled out in January, where the city is providing additional security around city facilities and city housing units. That is a program that we anticipate will continue to be supported and evolve and enhanced. I just don't want to say that we are the ones that handle anything to do with crime. That is something that is very much a police issue. But I think what this group could speak to is the way in which the design and the concepts and the study of this area, what kind of principles can go into the design that actually are part of crime prevention.
Yeah, Mark, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and again, so while this work will not provide, a complete solution to the problems that have been outlined, there's definitely some contribution that the design of these spaces will provide to that. So when we do really any design, what we want to keep in mind is what's called CPTED, or crime prevention through environmental design. And that specifically focuses on ensuring that we have open sight lines. So one thing is surveillance, and you had mentioned that, is that we want to make sure that we have open sight lines, that we're not implementing areas or spaces where people can hide out or do discouraging behaviors, those kind of things. So we want to make sure that the views across the right of way are open. What we also want to do then is, so this all works together. So as if there's increased servicing for further development and we get more people in the downtown, that will encourage more opportunities for businesses and elements and programming, and it brings more people to the street. So the more people that we have on the street, the more natural surveillance there is through volumes of people, where that will actually help to discourage those activities. The other thing as well is that through the decoration of the street, through additional programming, through making it more inviting, and through future development, that will also help to expand the use hours of the downtown, so that there are more people further, like throughout the day and into the evening. And again, that will help to get more people out and to help to deter that activity.
Thanks for that, Mark and Duggan. And I would also add that I think that situation may be more acute during the pandemic, as as Mark mentioned, when there are a lot of people around, there is less of that kind of activity, but many people are working remotely due to the current stay-at-home order. So there just aren't as many people, students, professionals in the downtown core right now as there would normally be in a non-pandemic situation. So I think that may also be a factor. The other point that Elizabeth raised was, what is the benefit of the bike lanes? Was it bike lanes?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
So the benefit of, oh, sorry, I'll just speak to the reason why the bike lanes were included. So, through the city's transportation master plan, the official plan, the downtown master plan, we've kind of harmonized all of these documents to create this plan for our streetscape. And a big part of that vision was providing those cycling lanes for allowing other types of active transportation into the downtown area. And that covers things like improving health of people and, promoting climate-friendly solutions to traveling and getting places. So that's one of the benefits of providing them. I don't know, Mark or Vince, if you can, I think Elizabeth was speaking more in terms of the benefit to business.
I can add a little bit to that, Gagan. So part of the benefit of the bike lanes is that it's encouraging that active transportation. It's encouraging people to get on their bike and go downtown as a destination. So as part of trying to make downtown a destination, they're not just driving downtown and parking their car, they're going down on their bike and walking around, which means we have to include a lot of those facilities for safe storage of their bikes. And those are things that we're going to look at, how we can give locations for safe storage of bikes. And there are some studies that show whether or not cyclists go downtown and make more purchases, but that's not really what we're focusing on here. We're just trying to create an active environment downtown, and the cycle lanes and encouraging active transportation goes further to doing that than just having more parking spaces.
Thank you, Vince. I think that's a good segue into the last point that Elizabeth raised, which was specific to parking. So was the question, Elizabeth, about parking enforcement, or that there needs to be more parking availability? What was your question?
My question was more parking. As I go up and down and I look at everything to see what would be more spaces available. For instance, the Beckett building, there's a wonderful, great big wide sidewalk with benches that nobody sits on. But basically, why is that so wide? That would be, I guessed, about 5 or 6 more parking spots. The CIBC has a big wide area. Again, could be a narrower sidewalk so that you could have 2 or 3 cars parked in there. Even on Wharf Street, there's different places that have a very wide sidewalk that probably would have been lovely if people would sit there and have flowers at the Beckett building and a wonderful view. People really don't come downtown, and I'm not sure if they would. People are very oriented to hop in their car and go to the gym and use the facilities. They don't even take a bike there. So to come downtown, to have a bike route, and the cost of it and the parking, because how will businesses flourish with bicycles coming down and sitting, if they would, in a large space? I honestly don't think it will happen. And we as merchants, we have to stay in business. And if we don't have people to come and shop, it's not going to help us much to have a bicycle lane. That's my thought. And I talked to 50 people now, and they all felt the same way. And I sent that again to you and I'll get more signatures, except the COVID stopped me. So even though people aren't interjecting, except for the workshop findings, which wasn't the general public. So I think it's very important to keep us in business, because we can't stay in business if we don't have people shopping. If they come down just to sit in the in front of the Beckett building on a bench, we're all going to go broke.
Mhm.
That's my
So there's a
Here.
couple things there. The requirement for more parking space, that's one comment to feedback. And the fact that perhaps the bike lanes would compromise the parking that exists now. And so how do you compensate for that need for additional parking?
Yeah, I mean, I
So-
would think for business, for us to survive, would be much more beneficial to have parking where people can actually park their car, because we're a race that we're not into walking downtown and sitting at the in front of anywhere really. So to keep us in business, and it's not just me. I mean, I've got 3 businesses two that will be open, and I talk to different people, and they feel the same way. Like, how are we going to survive
Mhm.
if we don't have parking for people to
Mhm.
park their car?
Vince, do you want to just go to the parking slide so we can just demonstrate again the figures about the parking?
Sure, I can go back to that.
Okay, thanks. And before you address the parking, Elizabeth, I just wanted to address one thing that you said. It's that right now, not a lot of cyclists come downtown. I think that it's really difficult at this point to anticipate whether or not this will, bring in more cyclists coming to your businesses, because right now there haven't been very many cyclists because there are no cycling lanes there. So, the argument then, or the rationale is that if we provide that infrastructure or those cycling lanes for people to come in downtown and have that connection from other parts of the city from the trail network, it'll start bringing people in and they'll have a safe option to come in and cycle into the downtown, and somewhere to store their bikes. And that will really help to increase the number of cyclists in the area. And maybe Vince, if you want to talk about the
Yeah.
parking.
So with regards to parking, so if you look at the downtown parking currently, there's, for most of the corridor through the downtown, there's parking on both sides of the road. So there's very little opportunity to increase the amount of parking downtown, because it's pretty much maxed out as to what you could have on street parking downtown. And it's a high level of parking compared to any downtown. What we're trying to do is balance priorities. So there is a priority for cycle lanes. There's also a strong priority for parking. We understand that parking downtown is important for the businesses there. And by no means are we suggesting that through this we'd be eliminating all of the parking. We're trying to establish a level that is acceptable for the amount of parking that we could trade off for some of the other features that we're trying to include, like better pedestrian spaces and wider walkways and cycling lanes through the downtown. So yeah, there is a contingent that has priority for parking, but there's also, a priority for the cycle lanes as well. And from the beginning of this project, because the right of way is only 20 meters, there isn't an opportunity to have all of it. We had to make sacrifices right from the beginning and balance the priorities, competing priorities, to try and develop a cross section and a corridor that's going to work. And we still have a lot of work to do that, but what we're going to try and do is find ways to gain as much parking as we can while still having the features that we're discussing. And we've seen it work in other areas with flexible parking that can be moved, maybe more targeted parking. So, where there's areas that don't necessarily need the parking, we can, bring in some of these other features and have the parking in areas where it's needed, near the businesses. So, maybe you can get away with less parking, but more targeted parking. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, Mark. That's kind of been our rationale from the beginning, is these competing priorities.
Yeah, I think that as parking is always going to be or have a priority, even though we are moving towards, promoting active transportation and alternative modes of travel. Parking still very much has a place, obviously, to support businesses and the like. I think what we need to do, as Vince was talking about, is we need to make sure that the parking that is provided is strategically located, and it still provides that sense of convenient parking, or short-term parking for the on-street, where they're placed in a manner where they are convenient for deliveries and drop-offs, the provision of accessible parking to promote, barrier-free accessibility in the downtown. That's obviously very important. But there are strategies, even though we may be with the preferred alternative reducing a portion of the on-street parking, there should be programs that go with that to maybe incentivize or have them as short-term spaces, so that there is higher turnover with them, so that they do a better job of supporting and freeing up space for people. Because what you don't want to have is people coming downtown and then having the perception that, I want to drive and there's absolutely no parking if they are driving into the downtown. So with that turnover, that would help. The other benefit, though, is that with the abundance of, or the amount of, I should say, of off-street parking in the downtown area, that's where, the longer term parking and should be maintained and targeted. And by making the streets more walkable, people would likely be more willing to, be able to park their car and move through the downtown on foot, as opposed to just coming to a destination and parking right out front.
Okay, thanks for that. So thanks for your questions and comments. Elizabeth, if you have time to hang in there for the remainder of the meeting, we may have some time for some follow-up after we address all of the other questions that were sent to us.
Can I just say one more thing?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Parking, and I don't know if that will change, but across the road where the city of Brantford had the power company and everything, it's 15-minute parking. And there's a lot of spaces taken up by that. Will that change to a longer period? Because nobody can shop in 15 minutes. And I know what it was meant for, because people run in, pay their bill and would come right back out. So that would free up quite a few parking spots. Is that something that's in the future?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. Parking is being looked at overall, Elizabeth, including the strategy for parking in terms of timing for on-street parking. All of this is going to be incorporated into the study and included when we give our recommendations. So all of it is being looked at.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us and for your feedback.
And I will watch for the rest.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Carrie, Ms. Carrie Corfin, are you there? Just going to ask you to unmute, Carrie.
Okay, am I here?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I just had a couple things. I know you mentioned connecting the cycling lanes with the trails. I think that's something that should be done now within this plan rather than as suggested at a future date. I think probably we'd get maybe more people from the trails than from the other connection on the other side. So that's just a suggestion there. I wanted to know also what's being done about the university and college parking to make sure they're discouraged using the on-street parking. But I heard you say that the time limits and rules for parking have not really been decided yet. So I'm hoping they remain short for that reason, but not 15 minutes like Liz was saying. Also, I'm wondering with your configuration with option 5 being your ideal, why can option 5 not be two-way instead of one? Like with all your two-way options, you did not give a two-way with one bike lane. All the two-way options had two bike lanes. And if we could have a two-way with one bike lane, then it does everything that option option 5 does, as well as slow the traffic more.
Okay. Duggan, do you want to redirect that question about option 5?
Yeah. Vince, do you want to speak about option 5? And
Sure. Yeah, I can speak to that a bit. So, one of the reasons we didn't look at that alternative, it was discussed, is just that it is counterintuitive for cyclists to have one lane and then go back on the other lane when there's two-way traffic on the road. So it's just it's not something that's impossible. It just isn't. It's not a traditional design, and it would be challenging to implement and direct cyclists through the downtown using that alternative. So it was that was the main reason why it wasn't carried forward. It does meet the requirements, like you said. Like it would allow for wider pedestrian spaces. But given the way that the traffic study results were presented, I think that, you know, the way the alternatives as we presented them were maybe the best alternatives that we had.
Okay. Okay, on another note, loading zones, where would loading zones be located in the parking area?
So with two-way traffic, you would have to have some dedicated loading zones, which would then take away from parking and take away from, you know, the pedestrian and cyclist space. So you'd have to have areas dedicated for that, more dedicated areas for garbage collection if you were using two-way traffic. With one-way traffic, the loading can occur within the lane itself. So we don't have to have dedicated loading areas, because a delivery truck can pull up in the lane, put on its four ways, and then drivers can navigate around it with the 2 lanes of one-way traffic. So that's another benefit to the one-way, is that it does reduce the need for some of those loading zones through the downtown.
And reduces speed of traffic too while it's at it, actually.
Yeah.
Maybe is one on one. Okay, let me see what else.
Terry, did you want us to first address your other questions that you asked about the cycling trail network and the parking?
Sure.
Okay, so I can speak a little bit about the trail network connections, and I might throw it to other staff to just assist me with answering. Vince, I don't know, can you go back to the cycling network slide at the beginning of the presentation?
Yep.
So as we mentioned, there are additional studies that were being done concurrently to this and right before this. One of them was our transportation master plan, and that really spoke to the inclusion of more active transportation options. And we do have staff that are dedicated to active transportation at the city who are looking at various options for connecting our transportation networks for our cycling lanes. Not pictured here is the Brant's Crossing and TH&B Crossing bridges, which are both immediately beyond the downtown study area, but we are going to be looking at how do we connect those 2 pedestrian bridges to this downtown area to create that larger cycling connectivity. We're just waiting for these environmental assessments to be done, and then the future capital projects can be planned for additional cycling lanes. I don't know, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if I have other staff here that wanted to answer or provide more, but.
Okay, I just because we're looking for a nice entryway from the trails to the downtown, so I thought now would be a better time than ever to do that. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you, and I'll submit anything else. And I'm not sure if anyone else from the BIA besides Liz is listening, but I'll take this back to our next meeting and see what everyone thinks and come back to the next PIC.
Thank you, Carrie. Thanks for your questions and comments. And as Guggen mentioned in her introduction, there will be another 2 weeks open for comments and feedback and questions. And we would encourage all members of the BIA to go to Let's Talk Brantford /downtown and to provide their feedback in any way that is convenient for them to do so before this this phase of feedback closes. So
Okay, great. Thanks. We'll remind our members about that.
Perfect. So thanks for your participation. We're going to address a couple of other questions that were raised on Let's Talk Brantford.
Oh, Maria, you're muted.
Yeah, I got you. Sorry. So we'll go to the first question from Let's Talk Brantford that I think has been covered in some of the consultants' presentations tonight, but perhaps could be synthesized into sort of a concise, what are the key benefits of this project to the community as a whole? So not just thinking centrally only about how it would obviously benefit residents and businesses within the downtown, but broadly, how would it benefit the community as a whole?
Yeah, I can take that. So the project is really split up into 2 different parts as the project team was going through. The first is the underground infrastructure, which really is what kind of necessitated this environmental assessment. And the second part is the above ground features and streetscaping that Mark had talked about. So the benefit to doing the underground streetscaping, or sorry, the underground infrastructure improvements is really to address any of the aging infrastructure that might limit the servicing capabilities. So for example, some of our pipes underneath the ground are over 100 years old. And, you know, we really have to take a look at those and see what is the service life left on them. And is there a way we can improve that aging infrastructure to make sure it's sustainable for future? Also ensuring that, you know, the official plan and the master servicing plan show that there is a lot of projected growth in downtown and in the Brantford area overall for the next 20 or so years. So how do we address the infrastructure and see what do we need to upsize to ensure that it can service the projected growth that's there, because we can only get developments if they're able to access things like water and flush their toilets and, you know, have access to those types of necessary components. So that's really the benefit is in ensuring that we're sustainable in the future for what our growth is projected to be at. And then, you know, the above ground features, similarly to what Mark was saying in his presentation, when looking at the other cities that have been undergoing similar revitalization projects, really there's many different things, like health, for example, by providing more pedestrian space, cycling facilities, creating a more walkable environment. It helps to improve the health of individuals in our community. You're getting people involved in active transportation, you're providing more of those opportunities. So it really helps to improve that health of everybody in the community. And then secondly, another important part is the vibrancy. So, you know, creating a downtown that has various unique elements like benches and street trees and, you know, whatever else it might be, art, creating a downtown that's vibrant and, you know, we're proud to call our core in our downtown. So that's another benefit that people are able to actually see and visualize. Another one is, you know, climate change. How are we addressing climate change? You know, providing more street trees and more plantings and more green space is really a huge benefit to the community. And, you know, through this project, we are going to look at how are we addressing climate change, reducing carbon in the environment. That's something that we can directly impact through this. And, you know, bike lanes also, promoting active transportation, less emissions from vehicles. That's a big part of it as well. And, you know, lastly, just the placemaking, again, as I said, of creating a vibrant downtown that people are proud to call their home, people that a place where people want to go to. So not just residents, but attracting people from outside the community as well, and creating a place that, you know, Brantford is really this destination. We are so uniquely located right beside the Grand River. We have this gem of a downtown. How do we fully utilize it and make it into this place that everybody wants to go to? So those are some of the high level benefits to the community.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Guggen. I'm going to address this one to Vince. So we had some folks ask us how the public's feedback is going to be incorporated into the study and the final recommendations that will be made for City Council to consider. So basically, how is the feedback that is received by this project team incorporated into what you provide back to the city in terms of your recommendations?
So to start, as part of this study, we have to look at every bit of correspondence that we receive. So every comment, every comment that comes in on the website, every phone call that comes in, everything, every bit of correspondence we receive about this project, we have to keep track of. And our project team is dedicated to responding directly to every comment. So that's the first thing that we do. And then with that, though, we do get quite a bit of comments, right? We're going to get a lot of different opinions. We're going to have a lot of feedback that may pull us in a bunch of different directions. So what our job is to do is to assess the feasibility of all of those comments that we're getting, and then balance all of those priorities and try and come up with something that fits in the middle. So while every comment is heard and is documented and is part of the environmental study report that'll get filed at the end of this, that doesn't necessarily mean that every comment is going to be addressed, because it's not really possible to address every single comment and include every single comment into this. Some things are just not feasible and don't work together at all. So I guess the only thing I can do is assure people that every comment is heard. It is incorporated, even though maybe you don't see it being addressed. And when we do respond to every comment, we do provide a rationale for why maybe it's not going to fit with what we're doing right now. So you do get, if you do take the time to send in a comment, you will get a real response from somebody about why your comment or how it's going to be incorporated, how it's being addressed, or why it may not be feasible. So you will get that feedback from us.
Thanks, Vince. And I think, would it also be fair to say that if we heard some common themes and some trends in the feedback where, both of our registrants today addressed parking, there were also some questions about parking that came to us through Let's Talk Brantford, that would obviously have a little bit more relevance if more people are saying it. Correct?
Absolutely. So if we were seeing those trends and people were all asking for the same thing, then we would have to explain why we weren't doing that. So there's, we're trying to accommodate, people and who's got, like, when we amass all of the comments that we receive, we are looking for those trends and what do people want. And, what we've seen and we've got in our slides is the summary of some of that feedback that we've already received. There's been quite a bit already, and we'll continue to keep track of all of that and present that back to people. What are the trends that people are looking for, so that other people can see that too.
Great, thank you. Going to address this one to Mark. We have talked a little bit tonight already about two-way traffic being considered, which is obviously would be a huge change and something that is definitely paramount as far as what people will want to weigh in on in terms of questions and feedback. Some of the feedback on Let's Talk Brantford address the fact or the perception rather that two-way traffic leads to more points of conflict between vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists, which could cause an increase in accidents, injuries, fatalities. Is that something that you could speak to and just a little bit more detail about traffic flow and whether or not that is something that would be a major consideration?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And Vince, if you want to, I guess, assist with that one as well. But
Sure.
I mean, obviously, so one of the big differences, obviously, between one-way and two-way is for pedestrians and as they are moving through the space. So what we need to do as part of this is really ensure that the crosswalk locations or crossing points are clearly identified, and that they do act as traffic calming elements. Because with two-way, obviously, if someone decides to cross mid-block, there's two directions of traffic to consider in terms of timing your crossing versus looking one way and attempting that. In terms of the opportunity for accidents or collisions and those kind of things, I mean, there obviously, I guess there is opportunity then if you do have traffic coming in opposing directions. If we have traffic in two directions with a lot of the curbside management and those things which will act to slow down traffic, there may be more opportunity for that as people are moving or trying to move around vehicles to speed up their trip, if you will. But I think the biggest thing with in either option is really traffic calming and trying to reduce the comfort, if you will, that vehicles moving through the space purely to move through the downtown have. If we do want to make it the perception of, or for traffic calming, you want to create the perception that maybe there's an alternate way that I need to go if I need to get there faster, or just know that it will take more time to move through a space. And I think if that's reinforced with some of these elements that we have proposed, that should go a long way to help minimize the opportunity for some of those conflicts.
If I could just add one thing to that is one of the elements that does add to the safety is the distance that a pedestrian has to cross the street. So currently with the parking, the way it's situated, you essentially as a pedestrian have to cross 4 lanes of traffic to get to the other side of the road. What we're going to do through our design is have essentially choke points where your roadway will be narrowed down to 2 lanes, and the pedestrians will have very clear, safe ways to cross, and they only have to cross those 2 lanes or 7 meters to get across the road. And those will act as visual points of for drivers that they need to slow down in those points. So as Mark alluded to, traffic calming really is the answer here for how to address a lot of these collisions and risk of casualties and all of that stuff.
Okay, thanks for that. Next question. This is interesting. What is the possibility of closing Coburn Street to through traffic with the exceptions of timed access for service vehicles such as taxi cabs and accessible transit vans? Is that a consideration?
Yeah,
Mark, you want to tackle that?
Yeah, I'll start on this one. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is there a possibility? There's always a possibility, I guess, right? And as part of this, we have to look and explore any option that there may be so that we are best serving the community in terms of how the right of way is designed. But what we don't want to do though is we don't want to contradict the other supportive studies that have been done as well with this. And to go to a permanent full closure of Colburn Street, there would obviously be impact to some of the businesses. I think that a pedestrian alley, if you will, through that area is always a great thing if you can make it work. But I think for that stretch and that length of area that may prove difficult. Now, what would be recommended though is that, and what we're trying to do is create flexible streets so that the street could be closed on a temporary basis if there were special events or any of those kind of things. And what you could do, I mean, if this turns into something that maybe is explored further, but because it is such a significant change in terms of the traffic movement and the programming and access to businesses and all of that, something like that should really be experimented as part of maybe a pilot project where, on a temporary basis, or just to kind of view and observe how that may go maybe in summer months, or in winter, but just to be able to kind of see and evaluate how that might work before you go to a wholesale change like that. So I think that by creating flexibility in terms of other movement opportunities, that you would be able to test certain things like that or have those closures. So I think flexibility is good, but the outright closure of a street, there's definitely more significant impacts that you would have on the downtown by doing that.
Indeed. Certainly there would be busiest street in the city. Okay, the next question has to do with cycling lanes. And the first part of this question, I think, has already been addressed in response to Elizabeth's questions earlier on in the meeting. But the second part of the question is about what informed the suggestion for cycling lanes. So was it based on the most recent outreach with the community and survey responses, or was there other more fulsome studies that factored into the recommendations for the need for cycle lanes that were based on 2041 traffic projections, and where do those numbers come from?
Okay, so I can answer that one. So the recommendation for it came from a number of different avenues. So when we did our workshops, it was pretty clear that almost every person who attended indicated that cycle lanes were important. And so that was a huge driver of that. All the stakeholders that we spoke to at the beginning were of that mindset. It also comes from the city's transportation master plan and official plan for, their future. The city's future plans include Colborne and Dalhousie to be part of that cycling network. So that also contributes to why we're looking in that direction. And then the assumptions for I think some of the assumptions for traffic projections, that all comes from the transportation master plan and official plan, and in the plans for the future growth in downtown. So we didn't necessarily come up with those. Those are the city's plans and what they're expecting for growth downtown. So that's where those assumptions come from. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, thanks for that, Vince.
No problem.
You mentioned the workshops, which is a good segue into the next question, which is what were the demographics of the workshop attendees? The questioner here just sort of expresses some concern that perhaps it is skewed to one demographic over another, and is the design thinking taking into consideration the needs of many, or the needs of maybe just like the loudest voices, or those people that have, a little bit more influence on what would be recommended. So what was the breakdown in terms of, socioeconomic class, gender, age, ethnicity, profession? Is that something that we could comment on?
Yeah, I can try to provide some insight. That's a great question. So just for some more background, the stakeholder workshops were really conducted to get an idea of the main stakeholders located in the downtown and what their thoughts were as their business was most likely to be impacted by any of the improvements we were proposing. So we did have about 8 different sessions with various stakeholders, including internal city staff who were able to give us direction regarding operational services, curbside management, those type of things that are more informing how these different cross sections will work operationally, as well as other external stakeholders, including, Brantford Police was present. We had the Grand River Community Health Center, Grand River Council on Aging, Wilfrid Laurier University, Conestoga College, members of the business improvement area, the BIA were also there, Chamber of Commerce. So we tried to make it as presented as possible in those groups, and really taking into account that these were the folks whose people who they serve would most likely be impacted. So, you know, the BIA was there representing the businesses. Grand River Community Health Center, which is located on Colburn, was there representing people who use their services, and so on. So while we didn't break it down in terms of attendees, socioeconomic status, gender, anything like that, we did ensure that we had a fulsome group representing various interests in the community.
Thanks for that, Guggen. And I could say, just from an outreach perspective, that that we've tried to use as many platforms and mediums at our disposal to get the word out about this initiative, so that we can get a good cross-section of feedback that reflects the voices and the makeup of our community as a whole. So I think this question would be for our consultants. Do we have an idea of when construction would begin, and what and how we would reduce the disruption to businesses in the downtown core that would be impacted by any kind of construction that is underway?
That's a really good question, and you know, we don't have we have a pretty clear answer, but obviously everything that, you know, that I'll try and give a little bit of an outline of what we think it could look like, but it's all pending approval from council and budgets and whatnot. So by the end of the year, we're looking to have the environmental study report filed, and then that would allow the city to move into detailed design, which would start in sometime in early 2022. That design would probably take at least a year and a half. So it would go into 2023. But what you'd be able to establish from that, and you know, from the end of our design, would be a clear picture of where some of the utilities. You have to think about relocating Bell, Rogers, Hydro, gas, all of those utilities that are underground, and that's a huge undertaking, trying to figure out where those utilities need to be. So what you'd start to see is in 2023, some of those utilities being relocated. So you'd see them out starting to move some of their, you know, putting up new hydro poles or installing some new gas mains in different locations. So that's what you'd start to see in 2023. And then 2024 would be when you would start to see some construction. What you would, I mean, we have to recognize that this is a pretty large area. You're talking 2 full streets through the downtown core, lots of old, aging underground infrastructure. So, you know, I don't want to speak too much about what the staging of that would look like, because we don't have a clear picture yet. But it would include some staging that would try and either focus on individual blocks, so that it'd be staged closures, or trying to maintain traffic on one half of the road or the other, to try and get some of that construction done. So we would, you know, with any project like this in downtown, we're always thinking about how we maintain access. That's something you have to consider at all times. In a downtown core, you have, you know, you need to maintain access for drivers to get downtown to the businesses, but also for pedestrians and foot traffic to get to those businesses. So that's something that would have to go into the staging as well. So how do you protect pedestrians to get to a building during construction? So that would, you know, one side of the sidewalk would always have to be open at all times, stuff like that, so that you could maintain that access. So there's a lot of detail that still needs to go into this. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of the design for that reconstruction. So it's exciting in how much work is there and what kind of you know, solutions we can come up with. But those are definitely things that we will be thinking about, and how we maintain the access to businesses and to drivers during construction.
So in other words, it would be staggered.
It would all be staggered. Yeah, you're not going to have all of it closed at once.
Right.
You would have probably, you know, small blocks at a time like a rolling or moving construction phase on one side and then the other. You have to build it in pieces because you can't close it all at one time.
Right. And I just know from my team's perspective, I would assume that we would be involved in developing communication plans targeted to the community as a whole to let them know what's open and how to access what. And then also working very closely with our friends at the BIA to make sure that they always have a heads up and know what's happening when and can have ample time to prepare from their end as well.
Yeah, so generally once we go beyond the EA phase, once we get into detailed design, you would go back to the public again and give them the information about what to expect, and then likely again right before construction, and you'd have constant correspondence with those businesses and with the people who are affected, so that they always know what's happening. They're never surprised by anything that's going to happen.
Great. The final question that we have from Let's Talk Brantford, we talked a little bit earlier tonight about security. This one is addressed more specifically to how will this work, or the result of this project help improve perceptions of safety in the downtown. Liz earlier mentioned in some of her feedback that she's heard that there is a reluctance to come downtown from people who do not live in that area and don't see it as a destination, potentially because they feel that there is this perception that is unsafe. Whether or not it is or isn't, we all know that perception can sometimes be reality. So how will this help overcome those false perceptions?
Mark, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I can. So in terms of the perception, so the perception is a big thing. So we have to remember too that through the streetscape design, so obviously there are a number of benefits we talked about with, obviously the driver of this is the servicing and the enhancements that are required for that. So that what that will do then is that provides further opportunity for further development to happen in the future in the downtown. The streetscape is really the framework, if you will, to support further development and to encourage developers to come into the downtown then and attract more businesses. And so as there are more developments and more people that are coming into the downtown, you then have more foot traffic, more need for additional businesses that maybe support the people who are there or who are working there. And then they just continue to play off of one another. I know one of the examples that we looked at in the examples was Kitchener. So Kitchener's downtown prior to the construction, it was, the perception of Kitchener's downtown was very poor. It was very much a 8 a.m. till 5 p.m. area where, people came to work or, to do shopping. And after that, you wouldn't find many people on the street because people were obviously worried from a safety perspective. But through the city's initiatives to enhance the streetscape, to really focus and target developers and through theming of various blocks and encouraging certain types of development over the last 15 years or 10 years or however long it's been, it's changed dramatically. So that you can, throughout the day, the number of people that are walking through the downtown is incredible. And again, it's not because of one specific solution, but it's all of these elements working together for the benefit of the area that play off one another and over time will, change that perception to where it is perceived as a positive place. Word of mouth happens, people want to go, and that also comes through additional programming. So we talk about flexible streets and using some of these open spaces. So if there is a focus on programming and events to bring people into the downtown, again, all of that supports one another. And that's where you're going to have the success of changing the perception of downtown.
Can I just add to that real quick? So at the start of this, we talked about how, the downtown streetscaping project, while a huge undertaking and a huge project that will benefit the downtown, is only one part of the vision and what's going on in the downtown. And we have various other projects and outreach initiatives and things taking place in the downtown. We do have staff here who can speak to some of the safety issues. Steve, I'm not sure if you're there and wanted to just quickly talk about the downtown security initiatives and how that'll supplement the work that we're doing here.
Sure, thanks, Gagan. Yeah, I can speak to that. Again, this project, one of the key objectives of it is to construct a downtown that is safe for all users. And the city is working on a number of other initiatives to improve the safety in the downtown area. And one of those includes the pilot project that's been implemented since January to enhance our corporate security guard services. And the service proactively deters and intervenes in situations presenting safety and security risks to people and assets on and in relation to city properties across the downtown and surrounding areas. And this program adopts several best practices when it comes to municipal corporate security. And it really sets an example for maintaining property standards and also demonstrating our commitment to safety and security. And on top of that, the city is also moving forward with over $800,000 worth of new CCTV expansion and upgrades, which will see the installation of the downtown cameras by the end of Q4 this year, and also a number of other CCTV upgrades at other facilities, including the Parkade library branches, several city housing facilities. And this is also intended to deter prohibited activities and also provide evidence to aid the prosecution of criminal activity. And on top of that, we are also continuing to evaluate other options for improving safety downtown. And this includes an assessment of crime prevention through environmental design principles, and looking at opportunities there to assess how that can impact improving public safety throughout the downtown. So, for example, looking at where we can improve lighting, landscaping, and changes to the physical environment to, again, improve sight lines and kind of minimize opportunities for prohibited activities to occur outside of the public eye. And those crime prevention through environmental design initiatives are also continuously being evaluated and will be part of the rollout of this project as well. And then on top of that, we're also working with several of our community stakeholders and partners to ensure that we're collaborating to address some of these complex challenges related to safety and security that we are encountering. So a community physical security advisory group, for example, has been formed to facilitate networking, coordination, and collaboration to support staff with advice on effective measures to protect the city's assets and people. And this group will continue to inform improvements to community safety as well, given that the challenge that we are encountering with a lot of this activity with the security guard team is related to some complex social issues related to poverty, homelessness, mental health, and addiction challenges. We appreciate these partnerships with our community stakeholders and being able to collaborate with essential support service providers such as St. Leonard's, Rosewood House, and the business community such as the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce for Brent, and also residents, including the Downtown Central Neighborhood Association, all to make sure that we're working together as best as we can to increase our chances of being successful in addressing these challenges to improve safety. So those are some of the other initiatives that are currently underway from the city's end to spearhead improving perceptions of safety in our community.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. I think it's also worth mentioning you talked about St. Leonard's, and St. Leonard's recently announced that they have received provincial funding to continue the Brantford Downtown Outreach Team project. which the city did some oversight on that, the pilot program, and saw some very successful results from that. And as you mentioned, they are very complex issues. And as Mark raised in his comments, this is not an issue that is unique to Brantford. These issues happen in municipal downtowns all around us throughout the country. And all of our neighbors have experienced it at some level. And we can certainly learn from the techniques that they have employed that have been successful, as both Mark and Vince alluded to in their presentations earlier tonight, in talking about other municipalities that have undergone a project of this scope and scale to address some of those issues. So thanks very much for that. That was a very good overview. Is there anything else that anybody on the panel wants to add as part of this that has not been addressed either by the registrants or the questions that came through Let's Talk Brantford? I see there are some other panelists that were participating tonight in the event that questions came up to their areas of focus. Is there anything else that anybody else wants to add? Not everybody at once now. Okay, I just want to make sure you had an opportunity to do that. Gagan, do you want to close with some other comments?
Sure. So I'll just close off tonight's presentation. I'll add one comment since nobody else on the panel did. I just want to emphasize again, the importance of the public engagement piece. As one of our registrants said, it's hard to get people involved. It's hard to get people to speak up at these types of meetings. And we fully appreciate that. We're trying to provide as many opportunities as possible for people to really contribute to this. We recognize that it's a huge undertaking and a really big project for the city. And, right now, while we are just at the PIC2 stage, things might still seem conceptual and hard to understand what it might actually look like and how it might affect businesses and residents and people who live in Brantford or downtown area. We just want to stress that, it's really important to get involved at this stage, and we really hope to see some more engagement going forward. So with that, thank you everybody for all of your questions, comments, and feedback. This is, as Vince said, a really important part in our evaluation process, and all of the comments and questions we receive are going to be looked at. They're all going to be responded to. They're all going to be included in the project file as we close out the project later on in the year. Before we adjourn, I just want to notify everybody that there still is another 2-week period for folks to submit any questions, comments, feedback that they might have. So you still have 2 weeks left to submit any questions or comments for this Public Information Center specifically. And we will be compiling all of the feedback that we've received to date and for the next 2 weeks into a frequently asked question document that we'll post on our web pages on June the 3rd. So there's still a couple of weeks left. We've added some new components to our Let's Talk Brantford page. There's now a map feature where you can pin your wish list for downtown and really, get more of an idea of what these improvements might look like. So we're hoping to get some engagement on there. There are several options to, submit the feedback. You can do it through Let's Talk Brantford, as I said. We have the map feature. We have an opportunity for you to ask questions on there. You can call us by phone. If you reach City Hall and you ask for me, you can reach us that way. You can submit an email. It's cobdowntown@brantford.ca. You can send us mail to City Hall, or you can always reach out to us in any of the other ways via the project webpage that are listed there. And just another reminder that the meeting is being recorded on YouTube, and it'll be available to watch again following this live meeting. So you can always go to our city's YouTube page and view it again at that point. The next steps, as I said, are for us to look at the feedback and compile that FAQ document. And we are still going to be accepting feedback throughout the whole project, and we will be communicating information about our next Public Information Center which we're expecting to have sometime in the summer. So we will be sending out that information shortly. And if you do want to be added to the project mailing list to receive those email updates, please let us know. We are more than happy to add you to that and send you updates directly. So with that, on behalf of the city, the consultants, and all of the staff and folks who participated and are here today, thank you for participating and watching. We can now adjourn.